Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show on this first day of July. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app is sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts, especially with what's going on with the Denver Nuggets right now, which I will get to momentarily after I give you the number. It is 719-247-1313. You can call or text in your thoughts, and I'm also on X at Gingerly Tweets. Yesterday, with the moves that the Nuggets made, and they broke as this show was going on, which is always fun. So we're reacting to it in live time with the Denver Nuggets trading Michael Porter and a first-round pick to Brooklyn to get back Cam Johnson, and then going out and signing Bruce Brown. And my overall takeaway in the moment was these are good basketball moves. Like, there's no denying that, right? Essentially, you get a cheaper, healthier version of Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Johnson. Maybe a bit of an oversimplification, but he's very much a similar player to Michael Porter. And you bring back Bruce Brown, who I don't know that you can expect to be way more effective than Russell Westbrook was, if that's essentially who you're replacing, but slightly less expensive again, and not as, shall we say, mercurial as a Russell Westbrook. Not as high variance of a player. And you kind of take it in the aggregate and you say, these are good moves. Like, there's nothing where you say, oh, the Nuggets got worse or anything like that. These are good basketball moves. But the question I had are the Nuggets really better after these moves? Like, really and truly, are they better? Because statistically, Michael Porter and Cam Johnson were about the same. Statistically, Russell Westbrook was probably a little bit better than Bruce Brown. So I don't know if the Nuggets, if you compare them to 48 hours ago to yesterday, I don't know that they're better. Then today happened. The Nuggets moving Dario Saric. Let me repeat that. The Nuggets were able to trade Dario Saric to the Sacramento Kings to get Jonas Valanciunas, who may be the best fit behind Nikola Jokic since DeMarcus Cousins. Right? And then just moments ago, Shams Charania reporting that the Denver Nuggets have now signed Tim Hardaway Jr. The details of such deal trickling in, if you care. It is a 1-year contract. Glad I grabbed my phone to be able to look up that piece of information that I probably could have just made up off the top of my head. Tim Hardaway Jr. feels like a 1-year contract type of guy. And the thing about Tim Hardaway Jr. is he shoots threes and he makes threes. right? So yesterday, the Nuggets don't, I think, move the needle that much in the grand scheme of things. But what they did do, going back to the fact that Cam Johnson is cheaper than Michael Porter, is that they opened up space. They gained that flexibility that they had not had the last couple of years. So without getting Cam Johnson in a swap for Michael Porter, the Nuggets could not have gotten Jonas Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway today. Well, maybe they could have gotten Tim Hardaway. Because of Bruce Brown signing the vet minimum, they had an exception available, but they couldn't have gotten Jonas Valanciunas. Because if they didn't open up any space, then the old trade machine would go, you can't do that because Dario Saric makes about half the amount of money as Jonas Valanciunas does. So yesterday was about, among other things, clearing space. So they could then go out and do what they did today, adding Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jonas Valanciunas. Now, we'll discuss throughout the show where this puts the Denver Nuggets in the grand scheme of things, because Jonas Valanciunas is being brought in to be Nikola Jokic's stand-in. And he's been the best man for the job in quite a while. Right? No doubt about that. He's better than Dario Saric, whose extent of his job description was just to show up in uniform at 7 o'clock when the game tipped off. So I don't know how much of an upgrade on paper Cam Johnson is from Michael Porter or Bruce Brown is from Russell Westbrook, but I can tell you that Jonas Valanciunas is an upgrade over Dario Saric. The Nuggets got better. Tim Hardaway Jr. is an upgrade from Julian Strawther. I mean, it's amazing what having cap space can do, because you just bring in a player and it's like, well, they're not really replacing anybody. They're just adding somebody. That's how cap space works. That's how free agency works. We had kind of forgotten around here because the Denver Nuggets were in the financial situation that they were in. You can just, during this time, you can just add players. And that's what they did with Tim Hardaway. Nobody left. They just brought him in. They're like, we have money. We're going to sign this guy. So today, the Denver Nuggets got better. I don't know that yesterday they were better. But yesterday's moves needed to happen in order to make these moves happen. And again, because not afraid to admit when I am wrong. Many people in my line of work don't like to do that. I don't care. If new information comes in, I'll change my mind based on that new information. I had my questions about this Nuggets front office. I still don't know that the setup, the co-GM thing, is super necessary or the ideal setup. I still wonder about it a little bit. But you can argue with the results. They have gotten a significant amount of business done in just 24 hours. And you can kind of picture in your head what this looks like. Again, is it the best version of a front office, the best setup? I don't know. But you can kind of now see how this works, right? Ben Tenzer and John Wallace go into Josh Kroenke's office yesterday and say, we're going to pitch you on an idea. We're going to trade Michael Porter. We got to give up a first-round pick in order to do it. And then John Wallace says we're getting Cam Johnson, who's essentially the same player Michael Porter is. And then Ben Tenzer chimes in and says, I've ran the numbers, and he's cheaper. And then today they come in, and then they say, we're going to get Jonas Valanciunas, who's an upgrade over Dario Saric. And then Ben Tenzer chimes in and says, we can afford him without going over the apron. Like, so you could see the roles that John Wallace and Ben Tenzer have. Ben Tenzer is, for fans of the movie Big Short, which just so happens to be my favorite movie, Ben Tenzer would be essentially the quantitative. He's the guy that runs the numbers. He knows this financial structure that the NBA is inside and out. And then John Wallace is the guy that can not only speak to who Cam Johnson is as a player, who Jonas Valanciunas is a player, but can also say, and here's a very important piece of all of this. Cam Johnson shot 39% from three-point range. Tim Hardaway Jr. shot 38% from three-point range. Neither player played with the best passing big man in the history of basketball. Right? This is where the player development, we always talk about Julian Strawther and Peyton Watson and De'Ron Holmes, and that still applies, but it's also the players, the more veteran players that you bring in that you can project a little bit given the personnel that they're going to play with. So you can see what this front office, how they operate a little bit. And I'm not in those rooms, but that's how I kind of imagine that this is how all of this is going down. The bottom line is this. The Denver Nuggets are a better basketball team right now than they were Game 7 in Oklahoma City. How much better? Because Jonas Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway are bench players. Okay? Nikola Jokic said that they needed depth. Clearly, we saw that with OKC and Indiana. It's important to add depth. The question is, are these depth pieces enough to push Denver past Minnesota? Is it enough to hold off Houston, who, by the way, has, I would argue, improved their roster more than the Denver Nuggets have? So it depends on where you feel like those two teams were going into free agency. And ultimately, the biggest question, and a question that the Denver Nuggets have to answer to the affirmative, are they good enough to topple OKC? Because this is a championship or bust season. It has been championship or bust for this basketball team. And clearly they're not taking a step back. Right? That was the other conversation that we had bandied about in the wake of Game 7. Does this team need to kind of reset financially? Well, thanks to Sean Marks, they kind of did. Not in the way we thought, where you're trading one of your big money players and getting back, accomplishing the depth and getting cheaper and all that kind of stuff in one foul swoop by trading a Jamal Murray or Michael Porter. But they have recalibrated their finances and they've added depth pieces. But this is a championship or bust year again for the Denver Nuggets. Specifically, Valanciunas and Hardaway. I think that's where the conversation has to be focused. Yes, you could say that Cam Johnson in certain areas might be better because he's playing with the personnel he's now playing with. Same with Tim Hardaway, or same with Bruce Brown coming back. But ultimately, the moves that have made Denver better are adding Jonas Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway. Is that enough? I'll take your thoughts on that. 719-247-1313. There's another thing that the Nuggets have definitely done. I can have my doubts on whether the Nuggets are better than the teams I just mentioned. But I do know one thing that Josh Kroenke has successfully done going back to 3 games left in the Nuggets season last year. I'll tell you what that is coming up next on Extra Sports 1300. Happy birthday, America. Celebrate big with the chance at $5,000 in the red, white, and win giveaway. Just head to extrasports1300.com now to enter this national contest, which is sponsored locally by H&H Tires and Window Nation. The Nuggets not done in NBA free agency yesterday, moving on from Michael Porter to Cam Johnson, bringing back Bruce Brown. Today, they have traded Dario Saric for Jonas Valanciunas and signed Tim Hardaway Jr. So another potential suitor to be a backup to Nikola Jokic brought in, and another guy who can hit threes brought in to the club. Both veterans, by the way. We got to get into a little bit later. So what's the plan with the young guys? Because we've seen the Nuggets bring in two veterans to add to their bench in the last 24 hours. Your thoughts at 719-247-1313. I want to give you guys a level of credit here. You texting in on the text line, because I feel like recently, even if you're just speaking it into the universe, like some things that you've brought up over the last few days on the text line have started to come true. I don't know if you want to spin a little bit of that my way. I could always use a new car or a raise. So if you want to like speak any of those things into existence, I'm here for it. Case in point, from the 719, texted in the other day about being a Kings fan and remarking how dumb the Kings are and that the Nuggets should take advantage of them. And then today, text back, good pick. I told you the Kings are stupid. You did. You totally said the Sacramento Kings are stupid and the Nuggets should take advantage. Now, is this a Kings are dumb? I'll let you decide that on your own time. But this was a move that was made because the Kings, in order to stay out of the tax, had to move on from Jonas Valanciunas because they needed to sign Dennis Schroeder. You may have gotten your answer just in me telling you why the Kings did what they did. And this is on the heels of someone throwing out the Sidney Crosby to the Avs thing, and then people are talking about it all over social media. Somebody texted in the other day about hoping that the Nuggets bring back Bruce Brown. I know that's not a new sentiment, but it was just before they did bring back Bruce Brown, and hoping that they would trade Michael Porter, which they did. And here's another text. Again, totally right. I can verify that this text came in a while ago asking me to give Ben Tenzer and John Wallace a chance because Josh Kroenke has hit before on front office personnel. He has also hired Calvin Booth. So let's not say that he's infallible, and I believe that's what I said when you text in. But to be fair, from the 719, I told you got to give these guys a chance. They might surprise you, and they have surprised you. I'm very happy with the Nuggets moves. I don't know how you can't be. Now, you could still ask the question, is it enough? And I'll pose that question to you. Where are the Nuggets right now in the pecking order in the Western Conference? But none of these moves you look at and go, I don't like that. And that brings me to my next point. Have Ben Tenzer and John Wallace with Josh Kroenke improve the basketball team enough to dethrone Oklahoma City? I don't know if I'm there yet. I still think I got to see what Jamal Murray looks like next year. I do still think that one of these younger guys on the roster is going to have to contribute in some way. So the player development side of the Denver Nuggets, I think still has to be a thing. But I'll tell you one thing that Josh Kroenke has successfully done, unequivocally. He has raised morale both inside Ball Arena and outside of it, which is what he exactly set out to do when he ultimately fired Calvin Booth and Michael Malone. He had sensed a borderline toxic atmosphere inside the building, and don't think for a second he doesn't know how you felt about his basketball team. And you think about the Nuggets leading up to the firing of Malone and Booth. It was not fun. It wasn't. It wasn't fun to talk about this team. It probably wasn't fun to be a fan for you. It seemed like the players weren't having a lot of fun. And look, this isn't youth sports. Like it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, so having fun is not the be-all, end-all. Let's call it raising morale. I originally called it that. Let's do that because that sounds a little bit more corporate, a little bit more sophisticated than talking about, vibes or having fun. But it all essentially means the same thing. And that's what Josh Kroenke set out to do. Right? What you see from the Denver Nuggets right now, these aren't new ideas. Heck, they're not even, bringing in different play. Look at Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson's a facsimile of Michael Porter. Bruce Brown was already here. Ben Tenzer and John Wallace are essentially internal promotions. I know Wallace went to Minnesota, but he was in Denver. They're not reinventing the wheel here. They're not drastically changing their roster. It's the same ideas. It's the same people, Nuggets people, whether it's actual people who are in the organization or just people that are very similar to Nuggets people, i.e. Cam Johnson and Michael Porter Jr. David Adelman was on Michael Malone's staff. So we're not witnessing radical changes within the Denver Nuggets organization, their roster, their front office, their bench. None of this is radical. None of this is wholly different. But how do you feel? Because phase one was the building, inside the building. Okay, you as a fan, you come later. Sorry, the top priority is the guys in the building, as it probably should be. You get rid of Booth and Malone. You put David Adelman in charge, and you saw the players responded. Right? They took more ownership. Morale seemed to be improved. And the result was better than it would have been, I think, if they would have stayed with the status quo. And I think Josh Kroenke felt that way at the end of it. That this team, he said himself that he thought this team was heading for a spot in the play-in and an exit from the postseason shortly thereafter. And this team ended up going 7 games with the eventual NBA champions in the second round. Now, compared to the year prior, doesn't seem like a lot of progress, but prior to where they were with 3 games left in the regular season, progress, improvement, it was better. And then phase 2 We're in phase 2 right now. The Nuggets didn't get a wholly different player in Cam Johnson. But Michael Porter had been a bit of a sore spot with you as a Nuggets fan. Would you agree? So if Cam Johnson, and it just speaks to, it was with Michael Porter, it was absolutely about the money. It was not about what he did on a daily basis on the basketball court. It was all about the money that he made. And to a lesser extent, his injuries. Right? That's what it was. But then even that ties back into the money. You're paying a guy this much money and he's playing on one leg, one ankle, one arm. But with Michael Porter, what he brought to the team, they needed. They need what Michael Porter Jr. brings. But now they get it in a different package. They take everything that Michael Porter is, or at least most of it, and they repackage it. And it says, no, it's not Michael Porter, it's Cam Johnson. And Nuggets fans love it. He brings back, they bring back Bruce Brown, who Nuggets fans wanted back the minute he signed with Indiana. And they began counting down. And people haven't stopped tweeting about wanting Bruce Brown back in Denver since he left. And today, you bring in Jonas Valanciunas, replacing him with Dario Saric. Again, another pain point for Nuggets fans. And you just add Tim Hardaway, too. Now, these two moves, Valanciunas and Hardaway, I do think make the Denver Nuggets better. But the main thing that it's accomplishing, the one thing that we know it's going to accomplish, is we're going to make you feel better about the Denver Nuggets. And that is part of the calculation. Just like Josh Kroenke calculated that he didn't have to go wholly different than Michael Malone. He needed to be just different enough, or just not that name. That's really all that's changed here. The names are different. And the way that people are talking about the Denver Nuggets today, as opposed to the way they were talking about the Nuggets, let's say 72 hours ago, it's night and day. And by the way, one metric that supports my claim, DraftKings is reporting that since free agency opened, no team has taken on more handle, aka money, to win the title this year than the Denver Nuggets. They have seen the biggest surge of betting coming in on Denver more than any other team since free agency opened yesterday afternoon. Call it morale, call it fun, call it vibes, call it whatever you want. Josh Kroenke's fixed it. And he said that they didn't need a cultural reset. They didn't need to rethink everything that they're doing. And in terms of public perception, he's right. The discussion around this team is incredibly different. Even last night, what DraftKings is reporting was after the Bruce Brown and Cam Johnson, not even after getting Valanciunas and Hardaway today. Just in that move, they got essentially the same player that Michael Porter is. They didn't get a better player. Bruce Brown isn't infinitely better than Russell Westbrook. The Nuggets didn't get better yesterday. And yet, they felt so different, didn't they? It felt like they had completely remade their team, and all they did was bring back a fan favorite and trade Michael Porter Jr. So, tip of the cap to Josh Kroenke. His main goal was to improve morale, was to get people believing in the Denver Nuggets again, and he succeeded in that endeavor with all of these moves that he made, firing Booth and Malone, hiring David Adelman, hiring Tenzer and Wallace, and then everything those two have done in the last 24 hours. Now the real test, right? Now what really matters is what we start to discuss. And in the fall, we find out. Because the depth thing is important, right? The Nuggets needed to become a deeper basketball team, and on paper, they are a deeper basketball team. But your top line talent still ultimately carries you. Look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, right? Look at Tyrese Halliburton. Are the Nuggets better enough? Are they above Minnesota and Houston as the biggest threat to OKC? And ultimately, are they a better team? Will they be a better team when it seems inevitably the Nuggets meet OKC at some point in the postseason? I don't know that this team, in terms of how good they are, has moved the needle a ton. They're not a ton better. They're better, not a ton better, but the morale, the feeling around this team, I mean, maybe not 180 degrees, but the angle is quite obtuse. And that's what Josh Kroenke set out to do, first and foremost. 719-247-1313. Take more of your thoughts, and I see them coming in now on the text line, so we'll get to those. NHL free agency open today. Notice that I haven't spoken about the Avalanche. Haven't done much, but Chris McFarland may be working on something. We'll talk about that as we move throughout the show as well. 719-247-1313. Celebrate the Switchbacks Independence Day fireworks spectacular with a 360-degree immersive experience of fireworks from the field after the Switchbacks take on Louisville City this Friday. Make sure you're there at 6 p.m. as the first 2,000 fans through the gates will get a limited edition Switchbacks bucket hat. Tickets will sell out. Get yours now at switchbacksfc.com. Nuggets making some moves yesterday, trading Michael Porter Jr. in a 2030 something. They traded an 11-year-old. That's what they did yesterday. I don't know who this 11-year-old is, but that's who they traded to the Brooklyn Nets and got back Cam Johnson. They signed Bruce Brown to the vet minimum, and that is significant, as well as the Cam Johnson deal, because it opened up space for the Nuggets to do two things that they have not been able to do the last couple of years, which is bring on salary and just sign free agents. What a novel concept. You can just sign players for nothing. I mean, you have to give them money, but you don't have to give up anything other than money to get them. The flexibility that they got with the two moves made yesterday allowed them to trade Dario Saric to Sacramento for Jonas Valanciunas. And then shortly before I went on air at 3, Shams Charania reporting that the Denver Nuggets will sign Tim Hardaway Jr. to a 1-year contract. Your thoughts at 719-247-1313. This one coming in from the 719. You have to remember the Joker factor, Ryan. He will make everyone newly acquired better, as he made Bruce Brown previously. And that is true. And that's why I said with John Wallace, his role in part in this Nuggets front office is going to Josh Kroenke and saying, this guy was this in Brooklyn or Detroit or Sacramento or Indy or New Orleans. But here, with our team, with our 3-time MVP, they could potentially be this. And that's the next part of all of this. When we're talking about free agency, we're just talking strictly on paper. You can't say unequivocally that Cam Johnson's numbers are going to be X, as much as fantasy football gurus and betting experts try to make you feel like they have cracked the formula to be able to project what these guys have. But right now, you're just essentially trading Michael Porter for a very similar player in Cam Johnson, and you're trading out Russell Westbrook for Bruce Brown, and you're trading out Dario Saric for Jonas Valanciunas. That's why I say the moves made today make the Nuggets better. I don't know if the Nuggets on paper are that much better with the moves they made yesterday. But one begats the other, as I have explained. But that's what I'm talking about. Now it's, what does all this look like? Right? Is Cam Johnson going to shoot 2% better from 3? Is Tim Hardaway Jr. going to shoot 2% better from 3? Will that ultimately make the difference? Don't forget the young players in all of this. You know, Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther and Deron Holmes. What are they going to look like? Like, that's the next step of this. I'm with you. Playing next to Nikola Jokic makes you better, and that was the reason I said that Bruce Brown was not nearly as good of a player in Toronto, in Indiana, and New Orleans as he was Denver. And why I said don't sweat losing Russell Westbrook too much, because I promise you he's not going to be as good at his next destination as he was this year. So I'm with you on the Jokic thing, but we got to see it. But that you can build that certainly into the big question, which is, are the Nuggets the biggest threat to OKC? And ultimately, can they topple OKC? But you just look at the names, and you say the Nuggets are better, they're not a ton better. But then you start, and I talked about this yesterday, the Nuggets are trying to win on the margins, right? Cam Johnson, statistically, same player as Michael Porter. Better, he's a better facilitator. Michael Porter's a better rebounder, but in the aggregate, same. But Cam Johnson may not be shooting with one arm in the playoffs, right? Bruce Brown, probably his numbers aren't going to be better than Russell Westbrook. But do you see Bruce Brown blowing a layup late in a must-win game like Russell Westbrook did last year? No. Dario Saric, they got nothing from. So if they get anything from Jonas Valanciunas, and they're never going to solve the non-Jokic minutes. We will be talking about non-Jokic minutes when we're in a retirement home. They're never going to fix it. Because Nikola Jokic impacts the game in so many different ways at the highest of levels, they will never find somebody that can keep this team from backsliding when they go to the bench. But that's not an uncommon phenomenon with every NBA team. Look at the Bucks numbers without Giannis on the floor, the Thunder numbers without Shea on the floor. You know, Dallas's numbers when they had Luka when he wasn't on the floor. Like, it exists for every team. The problem right now is the non-Jokic minutes are so damaging to the Denver Nuggets. Getting Jonas Valanciunas does give them the ability to maybe have a serviceable bench. And I couldn't even give that compliment to the Nuggets bench for the last few years. So they're always going to give up points. They're always going to be worse without Nikola Jokic, and they'll probably have one of the worst discrepancies between their starting five and their bench of any team in the league. Blame that on Nikola Jokic. But can they be 25th or 20th in bench production? Not really comparing it to what the Nuggets starting five is, but comparing it to its peers. Because in the NBA right now, the Nuggets are one of the worst benches. It's not just going from Jokic to their bench. It's that their bench wasn't even good enough for most NBA teams last year. So they're never going to solve the non-Jokic minutes. They're always going to have a discrepancy maybe larger than any other team in the league. But can the Nuggets bench climb a few spots? Can the Nuggets three-point shooting by adding Tim Hardaway Jr. and now putting Cam Johnson with Nikola Jokic, can they improve their three-point shooting a little bit more? They're trying to win on these margins. And they try to add it all up with the morale boost that all of this has done. And they say that's going to be enough because Josh Kroenke does not think that this team needs to be ripped down to the studs, that this team needs a complete makeover. And we're going to find out if he's right about that this upcoming season. This coming in from Drewski from the 719. I think the Nuggets signing / acquisition of the new players are great moves, but I think no one is really talking about what no one is really talking about is adding JJ Barea to the coaching staff. Good move. I was going to talk about it, Drewski. To be fair, Rodney Billups, former DU head coach, also being added to David Adelman's staff. The JJ Barea acquisition as an assistant coach is good. Is it more consequential than Valanciunas or Tim Hardaway or Cam Johnson or Bruce Brown? No. But JJ Barea, very well respected within NBA circles. And here's where I put up my Brian Windhorst fingers, because they were also talking about Jared Dudley. And Jared Dudley used to be in Dallas. Here are my Brian Windhorst fingers. Why are the Nuggets so eager to bring in people that happened to work with Luka Doncic in the past? What's going on here? Yeah. No, it's a good get on the staff by David Adelman, who, let's not forget, even though we saw David Adelman in the big chair, so to speak, he is now just entering his first year ever as a head coach. He's going to need some support. He's going to have a good staff around him. Now, let's not get into what the Broncos did with Vance Joseph and this super coaching staff, the dream team that they assembled, because that didn't work out. It ultimately comes down to the players, sure. But David Adelman needs some support. And bringing in a JJ Barea, it's good. It's a good move. Good call by you, Drewski. Tom says Johnson and Brown yesterday, Valanciunas and Hardaway today is great, and they got rid of Saric and MPJ. I feel like they have upgraded with every move made. Just depends on what your definition of an upgrade is. Right? Cam Johnson being cheaper, being overall healthier than Michael Porter has been, absolutely. But the numbers say he's in the skill set says he's Michael Porter. And I don't think that you can expect Bruce Brown to be a ton more productive than Russell Westbrook was. But today, again, getting back to what I started the show with, the moves today are the ones that unequivocally the Denver Nuggets roster has gotten better. They got Bupkis from Dario Saric last year. They will get more than Bupkis from Jonas Valanciunas. Is he the ultimate answer? Is it going to turn the Nuggets bench into the best bench in the league? I have my doubts. I don't think that was what they were trying to accomplish anyway. But Jonas Valanciunas is a clear upgrade over Dario Saric. There's no doubt about it. And just adding in Tim Hardaway because you can is a fun feeling to have for the Denver Nuggets, given what they've been through the last couple of years. But he makes the team better. So absolutely the two moves today, the two moves yesterday, it just depends on what your issues with, say, a Russell Westbrook or a Michael Porter were. From the 303, some of us have to work for a living. Could you please recap what happened today? I'm sorry, what's that like? Working for a living. No, I'm happy to do so. And maybe I already kind of did it with what I'm talking about, but the Nuggets have traded Dario Saric to Sacramento for Jonas Valanciunas. The Kings had to shed salary. They will inevitably buy out Dario Saric, but the Nuggets get Jonas Valanciunas. And then just before I took the airwaves at 3, the report that they had signed Tim Hardaway Jr., a sharpshooter. In fact, that's what Shams Charania tweeted out. Called him sharpshooter Tim Hardaway Jr. Shot about 38% from 3 last year. He has been signed to a 1-year contract. And to Drewski's earlier text, they have also added JJ Barea and Rodney Billups. So, lot to their coaching staff. Lot going on with the Denver Nuggets. Across the hall at Ball Arena, not so much. What's going on with the Colorado Avalanche? Because their free agency period started today and they just opened up this space. I'll tell you what gives with the Avs next on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a very busy Tuesday. Both NBA and NHL free agency are open. A flurry of moves being made by most teams and about half the teams in the state of Colorado. More on that in a moment. Reminder, you can watch the show live on a daily basis on our social media platforms. The handle is at XTRA Sports 1300. And while you're watching, you can even comment on the day's topics. Or if you want to go the more traditional route, the number 719-247-1313. You can call or text it in there. So the Denver Nuggets, again, our big story of the day. The Nuggets, with the space they opened up yesterday in the Michael Porter for Cam Johnson swap, have now absorbed the contract of Jonas Valanciunas by only trading Dario Saric, and they have signed Tim Hardaway Jr. to a one-year deal. So the Denver Nuggets have now added 3 new players and 1 new old player in Bruce Brown. The Colorado Avalanche, meanwhile, as their free agency period opened this morning, have signed Parker Kelly to a 4-year contract extension. That's essentially all the Avalanche have done. Now, Parker Kelly, it's a good move. It's a good move. They really found something with O'Connor, Drury, and Parker Kelly on that fourth line. So you get Parker Kelly extended, cost you a minimal amount of money, just like the one-year deal for Sam Malinsky was yesterday that they had agreed to. Good move. Keep that fourth line intact. You're going to have to deal with Logan O'Connor being hurt up until probably the holidays. That's another issue. But when those 3 guys were together, they were very good for the Colorado Avalanche. So not down on the Parker Kelly deal at all. And still a young guy. So a 4-year contract makes all the sense in the world. Low AAV. So all good there. But this is on the heels of the Avalanche making a fairly significant cap clearing move by trading Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood to Columbus. So the Avalanche have not done anything that, honestly, that they couldn't have done without that move, right? They could have re-signed Parker Kelly with or without the trade with Columbus. So while the Denver Nuggets, how about this? How about this for a reversal of what we thought was going to happen? On Friday, we're talking about the Coyle and Wood signing or a trade and how much space it opens up for the Avs. And we're going, man, the Avs are going to do something. Conversely, we're talking about how we don't know that the Nuggets are going to be able to do anything. And now here we are just a few days later, and the Nuggets have been one of the most active teams in NBA free agency, and the Avalanche have done nothing. So what gives? Well, I think there are a couple things here. One, what gives is that there aren't a lot of guys available. A lot of the NHL's business got done yesterday, especially with the Mitch Marner trade to Vegas. Not that the Avs were in on Mitch Marner, but that was the big item that a lot of people were looking at. And when that gets done, and with Florida doing what they did, I want to talk about them in a little while. Once Florida got its business taken care of, and once we found out where Mitch Marner was going, we were kind of left with the reality of this isn't a deep free agent class. Once the big names went, we're left with the remaining pieces, and like, there are not a lot of guys here. I'm looking at who might be available for the Colorado Avalanche at this moment in time. I mean, Evgeny Dodonov, That do anything for you? I mean, with the moves that the Avs have made, they got to the bottom six is what's incomplete. Right? Your top six is intact with Landeskog, McKinnon, Natchez, Nichushkin, Nelson, and Lehkonen. You have your fourth line locked up, although you have to figure out what to do with Logan O'Connor's long-term injury. But you have Drury, you have Kelly, you still have Colton on the roster. That leaves two spots in your bottom six that are unaccounted for, plus the injury replacement to Logan O'Connor. But with the Malinsky signing, you have six defensemen: Makar, Taves, Gerard Manson, Malinsky, Middleton. Now, how satisfied you are with the groups I just mentioned is another story. But in terms of just filling out the roster, the Avs need depth pieces, and Evgeny Dodonov would qualify as such. Nikolai Kovalenko, remember him? That was the other guy that went to San Jose in the Georgiev for Blackwood swap. Could he be coming back to Colorado? Potentially. But outside of that, not a lot out there. There is one name of note that I'll tell you wasn't even thinking about the possibility of him being a member of the Colorado Avalanche. The best free agent left on the board is Nikolai Ehlers, formerly of the Winnipeg Jets. He's a winger. He's a goal scorer. You could certainly a top 5 free agent in this class, maybe even a top 3. Maybe the Florida guys move him just out of the top 3. Now I'm thinking Bennett and Marchand if we count them. But certainly a top 5 free agent in this class. Wasn't even thinking about it. And why would I? The Avs top 6 is complete. Well, now I'm seeing tweets and hearing things on television and the radio that say that the Avs might be in on this guy. Now, does that mean they'll get him? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that. But what it tells me is that maybe the Avs are big game hunting a little bit here. And if you're going to go big game hunting in the trade market or the free agent market, sometimes you do have to wait a little while. Because these are the guys when it comes to free agents that are getting a lot of interest. So there are a lot of offers to sift through. And if it's a trade, you have a team that is probably fielding a ton of offers. So the big moves sometimes take a little while unless you tamper like the Vegas Golden Knights clearly did with Mitch Marner. But some of the other big names, Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, they stayed where they were at. If those two guys entered the market, my guess would be neither one would have signed by now. Because they'd be the two top free agents on the board after, again, and I cannot stress this enough, Vegas tampered with Mitch Marner. And they gave Nick Waugh to the Toronto Maple Leafs to shut them up. Shh, don't say anything about us tampering. Here's Nick Waugh. Whether they land Ehlers or not, it seems like the mentality with Chris McFarland is not to take this cap space that they opened up by trading Coyle and Miles Wood and go and fill it with bottom 6 guys. They'll figure that stuff out later. They want to see if they can't fit a player of significance into that cap space they created, which makes for a fascinating conversation because, one, let's just take Nikolai Ehlers because that's who we're talking about. One, Ehlers would still have to take a pay cut to join the Colorado Avalanche, given their current cap situation, and he's a bona fide top 6 guy. And the one thing on the Avs that seems to be settled is their top 6. So I'm curious as to why Ehlers for the Avs. And I think more than anything else, it just gives me some insight into what the Avs are thinking about. The Avs are thinking about, can we improve ourselves in a significant way? Rather than, hey, let's just take the cap space we have, sign a couple of depth forwards, and call it a day, and we got enough players to play in an NHL game tomorrow. I would doubt that they could land Ehlers, because every team that it was after Mitch Marner, LA Kings, is now pivoting to Nikolai Ehlers. But it's very interesting that all of a sudden the Avalanche have popped up with the top remaining free agent on the board. Now, here's another piece of this that I think also goes to explain why the Avalanche maybe haven't gotten a lot of business done. The defenseman market is drunk. The Los Angeles Kings are drowning their sorrows of losing Mitch Marner in a totally unhealthy way. They have signed Cody Ceci to a 4-year, $4.5 million a year deal. They have also signed Dumoulin, another defenseman, not of great significance, not a top defenseman. They signed him to a contract that's worth $4 million annually. And again, it's hard to pivot from the NBA to the NHL. NBA, we're talking 10, 20, $30 million. In the NHL, $4.5 million is not nothing. And to give that money to either middling defenseman, or in Cece's case, a defenseman whose fan base of his previous club was deathly afraid would return. So if you look at the Avs, yes, the depth forwards are an area of need, but I said this on Friday when I was talking about Bo Byram, that I think where the Avs are really looking to improve is on the blue line. Well, the market has kind of moved away from them. The price tag for Cody Ceci on the Colorado Avalanche would be playing with, Sam Malinsky. Cody Ceci wouldn't be this a second deep pairing guy on the Colorado Avalanche, let alone a top deep pairing guy. So I don't know what the LA Kings are doing. Apparently they budgeted this money for Mitch Marner, and they're going to spend it no matter what. But if the Avs are looking to improve their decor, the price tag going up on lesser defensemen could be why we haven't seen the Avalanche do anything. Maybe they're recalibrating a little bit, because now Bo Byram's got a full-out frenzy. It's a feeding frenzy. There's like half a dozen teams that are calling up Buffalo trying to consummate a deal. Now, you can also sign to an offer sheet, and that's what I was talking about on Friday. He's a restricted free agent, but Buffalo can just go, yeah, no, we'll keep him. Thank you. So the defenseman market has not gone the way that I think a lot of people expected, including the Colorado Avalanche. So they have to recalibrate a little bit. They have to decide, do we really now want to overpay for a depth defenseman? And maybe that's part of the reason why now we're hearing Avs and Ehlers. If they're saying, hey, if we're going to overpay somebody, which in free agency, you inevitably overpay. That's how free agency works, right? You're going to overpay. But would we rather overpay for a bona fide top 6 goal scorer in Nikolai Ehlers? Or would we rather overpay for a third D pairing guy? But if Ehlers is real, if it's a thing, if the Avs are seriously contemplating this, I forget whether Nikolai Ehlers will sign for $8 million. Where are they going to put him? You're going to put Nikolai Ehlers on the third line? I think you move somebody out. You take on Ehlers and you go, all right, maybe we lock up and I'll here's the easy dots to connect. We sign Ehlers, we get him locked up to a deal. Now we can flip Marty Necas. We don't have to worry about signing an extension. And I don't know what's going on with those talks. But that's got to be the guy. It's not that you would trade Arturi Lehkonen or Valeri Nichushkin. You'd be saying expiring deal with Marty Necas. We'll move that out to a team with more cap space. The first impediment, though, is that Nikolai Ehlers was almost certainly going to make over $10 million a year in this market, and the Avs have 8. So that's the first impediment. But if they're able to do something, and maybe they do it simultaneously, maybe they move out Necas and then sign Nikolai Ehlers. But again, my biggest takeaway is that the Avalanche are quiet right now because they're looking to do something big. Doesn't mean they're going to accomplish that, but that's where their mindset is with the salary cap space they've opened up. Take your thoughts on what the Avs should do. You like that swap? Signing Ehlers and trading off Marty Necas. I think it's interesting. I think Necas is better than Ehlers, but if you can get Ehlers at 10 and move off of Necas, who just saw Mitch Marner sign for $12 million, the guy he was traded for, Mikko Rantanen, signed for $12 million a year. I don't think Necas is going to think that he's that far behind those two. And for the record, I don't think Ehlers thinks he is either, but I don't know what kind of offers he's getting. Maybe he ends up signing for $12 million in a no income tax state. But that would be an interesting turn of events, certainly. But right now, the only thing on the books other than some Colorado Eagles signings is that Parker Kelly, important fourth liner for the Colorado Avalanche, will remain in Denver for the next 4 years. 719-24-7-1313 will continue with Drive Time Sports after this. Pro rodeo champions from the U.S., Canada, and Mexico are coming to Colorado Springs July 8th through the 12th for the NFR Open at the Pikes Peak or Bust Rodeo. And with payouts over $1 million, the competition will be fierce. Get your tickets now at pikespeakorbust.com. Nuggets doing a ton. Avalanche, not so much. Your thoughts on this day 2 of NBA free agency and day 1 of NHL free agency at 719-247-1313. Tom texting in on the Nuggets side of things. Nobody is talking about defense. They've gone so much better on perimeter defense. MPJ was such an unwilling defender. Also, you have a real backup for Jokic is great. MPJ should never be paid like that with the little defense he played. You keep talking about numbers, but those are all offensive. Well, fair point, Tom. Defensive win shares. One metric, right? Just one. Michael Porter, higher defensive win shares than Cam Johnson last year. By that metric, Cam Johnson, not a better defensive player than Michael Porter Jr. But it speaks to what Josh Kroenke has absolutely accomplished, which is making everyone feel a ton better about where the Denver Nuggets are. Numbers can tell you, and look, lies, damn lies, and statistics. I get it. But what else it's one thing we go on. Cam Johnson had lower defensive win shares than Michael Porter Jr. last year. He's actually in that stat category or that analytic. He is right on par with Russell Westbrook. And don't get me started on Bruce Brown. Okay, so the metrics, defensive metrics, would actually tell you that no, the Nuggets are not getting better defensively. But to a point that was made earlier by a texter, the projection of these players with the Denver Nuggets, right? Bruce Brown played with the New Orleans Pelicans last year and the Toronto Raptors. Cam Johnson played with the Brooklyn Nets. You could argue that on both ends of the floor, Bruce Brown and Cam Johnson are going to be better than they were in Brooklyn, New Orleans, Toronto, etc. I think, and I think that's reasonable to say that. But just to make a blanket statement that the Nuggets are getting much better defensively, the numbers say they're not. But this is where John Wallace comes into play. John Wallace, knowing the pro personnel the way that he does, he can sit in front of Josh Kroenke and talk to Ben Tenzer and say, look, Cam Johnson right now is a negligible difference from Russell Westbrook and the level of defense he played in this metric. Michael Porter was better in this metric defensively than Cam Johnson was. But playing in our system, everyone thinks that Nikola Jokic can't play defense. You know better. Now, he's not a good rim protector. That will never change. And he's not the second coming of Hakeem Olajuwon or Tim Duncan in that regard. But he's a better defender than a lot of people give him credit for. So you have that. You have Christian Brown. You have Aaron Gordon. That's the number one. You're playing one of the 5 players on the floor with you is Aaron Gordon. And another one is Christian Brown. Do the Brooklyn Nets, do the New Orleans Pelicans have 2 players as good defensively as those 2 guys are? I think New Orleans does in Herb Jones. But does Brooklyn? So it's part of the projection. It's part of the bet that the Denver Nuggets are making. And you can put that in as evidence. Like, that's part of the argument that you can make that the Denver Nuggets are going to be better for this, offensively and defensively. Look at where we do it with players in every other sport. Yeah, they're doing this in this place. Look at, here's a great example, Zach Allen. Right? Zach Allen, decent player, comes to Denver with all these other pass rushers and Vance Joseph scheme. Look what Zach Allen does. You can do the same thing with Cam Johnson. But I'm telling you, the numbers last year, the metrics don't say that the Nuggets absolutely got better defensively. But that's the bet that they're making. With the Nuggets personnel, Cam Johnson is going to be just as good of a defender, get just as many defensive win shares as Michael Porter, if not more. Bruce Brown, what he's been as a defender, yeah, it hasn't been very good since he left Denver, but now he's back. And maybe he could be close to what he was in 2023. And that's something that Josh Kroenke has talked about, right? The idea that what better sales pitch can you have than you're going to play with the best player in the world? Now, most people equate that to offense. But you can also, like, look, for instance, who the Lakers might be forced to sign as their center, or Indiana. I want to get into that coming up next. DeAndre Ayton. Nikola Jokic is an infinitely better defensive center than DeAndre Ayton is. So that has to go into the evaluation, but you won't fully know until this fall. And that's all I'm saying. We evaluate the moves on paper at this moment, project what we think is going to happen, and then we find out in the fall. That's the way this works. And I think it's reasonable to say that whatever Cam Johnson was with the Brooklyn Nets, in some ways he can be better playing with the Denver Nuggets. I saw a stat earlier. Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette, Nuggets beat writer, retweeted this. Tim Hardaway Jr. made like 67 or 70, some ridiculous number percentage of his open threes. What does Nikola Jokic get you? Open threes. What does playing with the Pistons get you? Not as many open threes. I'm not trying to talk anybody down from their level of excitement. I'm just remarking on how similar the players the Nuggets acquired yesterday were from what they had, and yet the perception around this team has completely changed. But that's also part of it, right? I heard, who was it? Shams last night talking about Michael Porter needing a fresh start. Right? The Nuggets and Porter needing a fresh start. I think that that's valid. Right? Did the Nuggets get a ton better with Cam Johnson as opposed to Michael Porter? No, they did not. But was it time for this partnership to come to an end? I think it was. I think it absolutely was. I just didn't know that they could move him. So thank you, Sean Marks. And the thing with Michael Porter, I hope that there's a little bit more appreciation now and moving forward for what Michael Porter was. I know the money got in the way, but the guy fell to the Denver Nuggets because supposedly he was not going to be able to play basketball. And he has battled through malady after malady. And he has contributed to winning a title for the Denver Nuggets. And I saw somebody put it this way on X, and I thought it was a perfect way to kind of put it. If Michael Porter doesn't persevere the way he did, doesn't push through, doesn't make himself defy the odds that were placed on him when he came into the year, the Nuggets would not be able to do what they did yesterday, which was acquire a quality player in return for Michael Porter. I'm still a little wondering why the Brooklyn Nets did this. Their motivation, I think it has to do with the fact that the pick that they got is maybe when Nikola Jokic has hung them up and what the Nuggets are going to look like after that. But they don't give the Nuggets Cam Johnson if they don't think that Michael Porter Jr. is a good basketball player. So the contract really mucked things up and I think really altered people's perspective of what Porter was being asked to do and what he did. But there's no doubt that that partnership had reached its end. Both parties probably will be better off moving forward. Now, 719-24/7, 1313. I got to talk about what's going on in Milwaukee. I know we're thousands of miles away, but what happened today with the Milwaukee Bucks is just absolutely stunning. And the fallout from this is fascinating. Talk about that next here on Extra Sports 1300. Happy birthday, America. Celebrate big with a chance at $5,000 in the red, white, and win giveaway. Head to extrasports1300.com now to enter this national contest, sponsored locally by H&H Tires and Window Nation. Tom says, I don't care what your metrics say. I've been watching the NBA since 1980, and MPJ is one of the worst defenders I've ever seen. I can't believe the Nuggets bamboozled teams into taking MPJ and Saric. What a win. We agree on more than you're letting on, Tom. I'm just telling you, have you watched Cam Johnson? He's not an infinitely better defender. That's all I'm saying. But can he be better than Porter was with the Denver Nuggets? I think so, because he has better personnel around him. Now, I share in your level of disbelief that the Denver Nuggets were able to pull off these moves. And I think the motivation I think there's something at play going on right now with the Denver Nuggets. And we're seeing other teams at various stages of this with the financial rules, right? If you are a team that is or has been on top, before you can go back up and start adding again to your team, you need to take some hits. The Nuggets have taken some hits. We would all agree, yes? They've lost talent the last couple of years. But now they've hit a point where now they can start adding again because of what they were able to do financially, and what you can do along the way is you can take advantage of a team that's at a different stage of the game than you are, like the Brooklyn Nets, who aren't planning on being good anytime soon. So a first-round pick in a year where maybe Nikola Jokic is either nearing the end of his career or has retired is actually a valuable asset. And then you open up some space, then you go to Sacramento, because here's the other thing with Cam Johnson that I haven't even talked about that much. He's on the same contract as Porter, same contract timeline. Right? So the Brooklyn Nets get this additional first-round pick. They send out a player that they probably had no plans on signing in Cam Johnson, and bring in a player, Michael Porter, who they also probably have no intent to sign. But they get the extra pick. They get the pick, right? And then with the cap space they made, they then go to another team that's, toiling in some level of mediocrity in the Sacramento Kings. And I mentioned this when they drafted Neek, like they're not a terrible team, but they're also certainly not a contending team. And you go to them because they need to dump salary because they got to get a point guard, which my Sacramento King fan, he knows why they need a point guard. Because the point guard they had led the Indiana Pacers to the NBA Finals. But they need a point guard. They didn't need a backup center. So the Nuggets have been opportunistic with these moves as well. They haven't gone to another contending team and say, hey, let's swap some players here. They've gone to teams that are rebuilding, teams that are approaching these financial restrictions and saying, hey, you can dump some salary on us. Or in the Brooklyn Nets case, we'll give you a future first-round pick, probably their only real tradable asset, in order to take on Porter's money. And Brooklyn's like, we have plenty of cap space. Awesome. Right there. Wallace and Tenzer have been opportunistic, and they've talked to the right teams in order to facilitate these moves. And that's why why are these teams taking on? I can't speak to how savvy the Sacramento Kings or Brooklyn Nets front offices are, but I'm looking at from their side and I'm saying Kings don't want to go into the tax. Brooklyn, it was not going to sign Cam Johnson in a couple of years, and they would very much like to acquire the first round pick of the Denver Nuggets in a year they might not have Nikola Jokic. But you can only do all of that if you've lost a little bit, right? The Nuggets have lost to the point, if they signed up KCP and they were in the second apron, or they would have signed Bruce Brown, or Russell Westbrook wouldn't have opted out. Like, they had to lose some along the way in now order to win. And that's what we're seeing from a number of teams across the NBA. It matters what stage in the financial cycle you're in, whether you can make moves or not. But a ton of credit to Tenzer and Wallace, again, because I didn't think that they would be able to do much of anything. In fact, Ben Tenzer said after the draft that they were more focused on free agency than trades, and the most significant move that they made was a trade. So they get a ton of credit. But you look at the teams that they were trading with, or the teams that they were dealing with, and you say they were talking to the right teams. At least say that. Don't want to be too disparaging, but they were the right teams to discuss. They're in different places in their franchise's timeline. Now, one team that is in a similar spot to the Denver Nuggets in that they have their eye on winning a title. They have a superstar player, face of the team, that there are questions about whether they want to stay long-term in their city. And having that could lead you to make some very rash decisions, some very interesting decisions. What the Milwaukee Bucks have done today is stunning. They basically waive Damian Lillard. The man gives his Achilles to the team, trying to help them win a title, trying to help Giannis win a title, and the Bucks cut him. And they use the money that they will save to go out and sign Miles Turner away from the Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers made a move during the NBA Finals, if you recall, where they basically gave up this year's pick, first-round pick, to get their first-round pick next year back. What was the reason for that? So they'd have the money to sign Miles Turner, to go into the tax to sign him, because if they had to sign a first-round pick as well, wouldn't have been able to do it. The Pacers, the move they made during the finals was so they could sign Miles Turner. And it appeared that the Bucks stole him away. And the Pacers, ultimately, there was a number that they weren't willing to get up to, even though they could have, and they didn't. Where does that sound familiar? The Indiana Pacers, fresh off of a finals appearance, were not willing to go into the apron to sign Miles Turner, and the Bucks were able to get him. So we have kind of two stories in one. We have the Miles Turner side of this, and we have the Damian Lillard side of this. The Miles Turner side of this, well, let me say the Damian Lillard side first. Chris Haynes is reporting that Giannis is not happy that they did this to Damian Lillard. And I don't think it's necessarily as much about Damian Lillard as a teammate as much as it is Damian Lillard as a fellow NBA player. The Bucks were pretty cold-blooded to do this. Right? They come across as a little cold and unfeeling. And other NBA players would probably look at that and say, dang. And maybe that's what Giannis is feeling. But the Bucks did it to placate Giannis. Right? Because Damian Lillard isn't going to play maybe at all next year, but certainly most of next year. So can the Bucks really expect to go to an NBA Finals when their second best player is on the shelf with indefinitely with an Achilles tear? So the Bucks, if Giannis is unhappy with what they did to Damian Lillard for whatever reason, he also has to look at them signing Miles Turner and saying, I have a better chance at winning this year than I did 24 hours ago because now I have Miles Turner. And before I had no Damian Lillard. I still don't have Damian Lillard, but now I have Miles Turner. The Bucks are doing this for Giannis. They traded for Damian Lillard in the first place because of Giannis. One thing you cannot say about the Milwaukee Bucks is that they're not trying to do everything they can to get Giannis another title. They did it with the Lillard trade, and they did it with the Miles Turner signing. Both come with questions as far as what they gave up and what they have done along the way, but they're all doing this to placate Giannis, to keep Giannis in Milwaukee. And if he is upset over Damian Lillard, I think that eventually he'll come around to the idea of this. I see the vision. I see what this team is doing. And it's because of that comment I made in the New York Times a couple of years ago. So the Bucks are better than they would have been 24 hours ago. And now the Pacers are worse. And I'm seeing stuff out of Indiana that reminds me of the conversations you and I had after the Nuggets won the title. And then the following year, right? Bruce Brown, especially Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. This team's in a championship window and you're letting this key player just walk out the front door. That's exactly what they're saying in Indiana right now. And he lands on the Bucks. I know the Eastern Conference is not nearly as good as the West, but in terms of how interesting it is, they're about the same level. That was wild today. So Damian Lillard out in Milwaukee. Miles Turner in. And maybe most importantly, Miles Turner out of Indiana, who had a real shot, Indiana did, of going back to the NBA Finals. 719-24-7, 1313. We'll bring it back locally with the three stories that are driving the show right after this. Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, of course, is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. So much going on with NBA and NHL free agency. I welcome your thoughts. It's been a great discussion already, and I would love to continue that in this hour. 719-247-1313. You can call or text in your thoughts. Perhaps you have thoughts on these, the three stories that are driving the show. All right, we'll start with the co-GM thing kind of working out in Denver. Here's story number one.
Jose left wing 30. Tipped up. Notice! Got it! Second chance points, Valanciunas.
WRNO on the call. The Denver Nuggets. Have they finally found a capable backup to Nikola Jokic? It's getting to the point where if Jonas Valanciunas is not that, then it's never going to happen. The Denver Nuggets traded Dario Saric today to the Sacramento Kings and in return received Jonas Valanciunas. This is a guy that not that long ago was actually a starting center in the NBA. You remember him when he was in Toronto, yes? He's been a good player. And you look at his style of play. I mean, he went to Memphis, who's pretty good. New Orleans, things started to kind of go downhill, and he spent time in Washington and Sacramento this year. But for his career, 13 points, 9 rebounds, assist and a half, a block a game. Not eye-popping numbers, but certainly the size, the playing style, I think absolutely it gives the Denver Nuggets their best chance to have an adequate stand-in for Nikola Jokic since probably DeMarcus Cousins. And while the Denver Nuggets are never going to solve the non-Jokic minutes, the non-Jokic minutes are always going to worry you as a Nuggets fan because the Jokic minutes are so good. There's going to always be that disparity. But in the Nuggets they can never chase that because they're just never going to reach it. They're never going to find somebody that is going to be capable of replicating what they get from Nikola Jokic. It's just never going to happen. But can the bench that they have, including now Jonas Valanciunas, be better than, let's say, Houston's bench or Dallas's bench? Or, like, can it be better than some of the other benches in the Western Conference? With Jonas Valanciunas as opposed to Dario Saric, it at least gives them a better chance. And then the Nuggets weren't done. Here's story number two.
The lead is 42, and Hardaway makes it 45. He's 5 for 5 off the bench from three-point land.
ESPN radio on the call. The Nuggets signed Tim Hardaway Jr. Remember, his dad played for the Nuggets once upon a time. Now Tim Hardaway Jr. signs with the Nuggets on a 1-year deal. Now, these are two moves today as opposed to the moves yesterday, where I think you can say that the Nuggets are better than they were. Cam Johnson being so similar to Michael Porter. Bruce Brown, I don't think you can expect him to be a ton better than Russell Westbrook in terms of his production. But what Ben Tenzer and John Wallace did yesterday, while acquiring those players that certainly didn't make the Nuggets worse, was clear up room so they could essentially take on twice the contract that Dario Saric had to bring in Valanciunas and get a better player. And then just because you can never have enough three-point shooting, they go out and they bring Tim Hardaway in. So in many ways, Bruce Brown was an exception that the vet, you essentially traded Michael Porter and a first-round pick, and because of your cap savings, you brought in Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, and Jonas Valanciunas. Oh, and you had to give away Dario Saric. Sorry, I forgot. Dario Saric was such a nothing burger in Denver, I almost forgot he existed. So you give up Saric, Porter, and a first-round pick in the 2030s, and you get Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, and Jonas Valanciunas. I had my questions about this front office. It's hard to argue with the results. The Nuggets are a better team than they were Game 7 against Oklahoma City. But as we know, the Western Conference has gotten a little bit more crowded. Minnesota still exists. But the Nuggets have given themselves, I don't know how they could have given themselves a better chance in the first 24 hours of free agency to hold off Houston, to finally get over that hump with Minnesota, and dethrone OKC. I don't know if they're going to check all of those boxes. I still think that Oklahoma City, we're not factoring in how much better OKC will be next year, having gone through it before. Right? We saw signs of a younger team at times, including in the Nuggets series, which was part of the reason why it went 7. But I think that the Nuggets are right there. Minnesota, Houston, OKC, Minnesota and Houston, Denver, all battling it out to be the biggest threat to OKC. And as long as they can get over their weird, the matchup problem that the Minnesota Timberwolves are, and by the way, Tim Hardaway, a more bona fide three-point shooter, could help them with that. I think that the Denver Nuggets are the biggest threat. When I take everything into account, I think they're the biggest threat to OKC. I don't think they're better than OKC right now. I would still take OKC in a 7-game series, but I think on paper, I think that the Nuggets are the biggest threat to OKC in the Western Conference this year. Not so much what they did yesterday, although what they did yesterday allowed them to do what they did today. We've been talking about depth. We've been talking about three-point shooting. And the Nuggets did not fall off three-point shooting-wise with their additions yesterday, and they got better with Tim Hardaway. In depth, Tim Hardaway and Jonas Valanciunas. They're deeper and they're a better three-point shooting team, and those were the main areas of concern coming out of a second-round playoff exit again. But more than that, Josh Kroenke has accomplished his main goal. His main goal was to boost morale, to change the conversation, to change the way people felt about his basketball team. And what's fascinating to me is that they're not wildly different. They didn't go out and say, all of a sudden, now we need all these different kinds of players. It's still the same ideas. It's still some same people. David Adelman was on Michael Malone's staff. Ben Tenzer has been in the Nuggets organization for years. John Wallace was in the Nuggets organization before he left with Tim Connolly. Still doing it with his people. He's even bringing back Bruce Brown. Same ideas, same people. But it feels like the Nuggets are so wildly different than they were just 48 hours ago. And that's what Josh Kroenke has been saying, that they didn't need a cultural reset. They didn't need to reinvent who they were. They just need to remove lessen a few pain points. Right? The dynamic between Booth and Malone, Michael Porter Jr. and how fed up a lot of fans had become with him. To bring back the prodigal son in Bruce Brown, who Nuggets fans have been missing for the last 2 years. The Nuggets made good basketball moves. Let's not lose sight of that. But I think that right now, the biggest story is the fact that the Nuggets feel entirely different without actually being that different. And now we go to one of Josh Kroenke's other teams, or Stan Kroenke's other teams, for story number 3. I don't have any audio because the Colorado Avalanche have not really done anything. The one move they made as NHL free agency opened today was to sign Parker Kelly to a 4-year extension. That is a good move. Parker Kelly, Logan O'Connor, and Jack Drury, they really found something with those guys on that fourth line. And Parker Kelly, by NHL standards, makes next to nothing. This was an easy piece of business to get done. Kudos to Chris McFarland for getting it done. But the Avs just cleared a decent chunk of change in cap space. And yet they seem to be on the sidelines as NHL free agency is almost over. That's how quickly NHL free agency is gone. But what are the Avalanche up to? A rumor that just popped up this afternoon. Nikolai Ehlers, who unequivocally is the best free agent left on the board, was one of the better free agents going in to this period. So it's not like he's only risen because so many other guys are off the board. He was a top 5 free agent going into the process. All of a sudden, the Avalanche are linked with Nikolai Ehlers. Which tells me that the Avalanche have some more grand plans for this cap space than just signing a couple of depth wingers and calling it a day. They're thinking big. Can we significantly add to our team? But even then, it's hard to see how Ehlers ends up in Colorado unless someone else is moving out. If the Avalanche are able to come to an agreement with Nikolai Ehlers or get an idea what his number is, right? They talk to Ehlers, would you like to come to Colorado? If he answers in the affirmative, you ask for his number in terms of a salary figure. And then if that's amenable to Chris McFarland, he will then get on the horn and see who wants to trade for Marty Necas. You sign Ehlers to a multi-year contract. You move Necas, and maybe that's how you get the depth pieces. Maybe that's how you get some help on the blue line by trading Marty Necas. It's a little backwards from what we thought the Avs were going to look to do. We thought they were just going to make signings to attack their depth. And because of the way things have gone, both in free agency, but also perhaps with their negotiation with Marty Necas, they're saying, all right, here's Ehlers. He'd be good. Why don't we take him on a multi-year deal if he will agree to it, and then take Necas and move him and address filling out the rest of our roster, addressing the blue line. I don't think it's a bad, if that's what's going on, I don't think that's a bad idea, because the defenseman market has been a bit nutty today. The LA Kings signed 2 unconscionable contracts today, wallowing in self-pity because they didn't land Mitch Marner. They signed Ceci and Dubulin to $4.5 and $4 million per year salaries, which for that level of defenseman is a lot of money. The defenseman market, I think, is getting away from the Avalanche a little bit. And I think that's also part of the reason why they're pivoting here. And maybe they can get a cheaper depth defenseman by moving on from a Marty Necas. But Chris McFarland's cooking up something. And we'll see if it comes to fruition at some point today or in the coming days as NHL free agency. Again, just about over. The Avalanche are going to do something. They probably need to do something within the next 48 hours. 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving this show. Mention the big national story with the Bucks dumping Damian Lillard, cutting him, and then turning around and getting Miles Turner. Good, good for them. Onward and upward with the Milwaukee Bucks. But Damian Lillard's now a free agent. Get where I'm going with this? Talk about it next here on Extra Sports 1300. It has now become an annual tradition here in Colorado Springs that the Switchbacks host a match on the 4th of July and put on just the best fireworks show you'll ever see. So if you want some soccer to go along with your fireworks on Friday, hit me up. Be the 13th texter to text Switchbacks and your name to 719-247-1313. The 13th texter to do that will win a pair of tickets to see the Switchbacks take on Louisville City this Friday. Make sure you stick around after the match for the fireworks as well. So a fascinating day surrounding the Milwaukee Bucks organization, as what they essentially did today was what the Denver Broncos, did to Russell Wilson. I'm having a hard time finding the difference. I mean, it's essentially the same thing. Yeah, they still owe Damian Lillard a lot of money, but they opened up just enough cap space to be able to sign Miles Turner, and I would expect the Milwaukee Bucks to make other moves today, tomorrow, and in the coming days as well. But we've never seen this, just like we've never seen a team do what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. So now could the Denver Nuggets be in the position that the Pittsburgh Steelers were in, where they could go, well, the Milwaukee Bucks are paying most of the freight here. We'll just take Damian Lillard. Pay him the vet minimum, because apparently that's all the Denver Nuggets are doing right now. More details coming in. Tim Hardaway signed the vet minimum too. He's got the vet. You get the vet minimum. Bruce Brown gets the vet minimum. I mean, they could do that. Any team that wants to bring in Damian Lillard would be able to do it for pennies on the dollar, because Milwaukee is paying him so much money. So should the Nuggets be interested in the services of Damian Lillard as a futures play here? Because here's the thing. Damian Lillard will not play basketball for the vast majority of this season. Right? There's even a question of whether he'll play at all. But a player of Damian Lillard's caliber, you're never going to get on the cheap. And now you can, because in comparing Damian Lillard to Russell Wilson, I'll tell you that I believe that Damian Lillard has more left in the tank than Russell Wilson did. Now, there are concerns, certainly, with how he comes back from the Achilles at his age. So the idea that you're going to get, Dame time in all his resplendent glory, the unfortunate part of this is you're probably not. But you are getting a player, a lesser version, if you will, of Damian Lillard for nothing. And the Nuggets aren't in a position where they would be asking Damian Lillard to be the difference between them winning a championship. They'd be bringing him in, and who knows the possibilities that would be around that. Maybe Damian Lillard comes back from the Achilles and he's the best point guard the Denver Nuggets have when he starts playing. I'd consider it, because like Russell Wilson and just like with the Denver Broncos, it's a little bit cold-blooded what the Milwaukee Bucks have done, but I don't blame them. The clock is ticking. Giannis at any point could be like, get me out of here. They're sitting on a ticking time bomb. Everything they do needs to be aimed at winning. And Damian Lillard not playing for 95% of next season isn't going to get the Milwaukee Bucks back to the NBA Finals. And it's the same thing with the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was going to get the Denver Broncos to where they wanted to go. And yes, the way they went about it was not the greatest. A lot of people around the league kind of looked at the Denver Broncos and sneered at them. But ultimately, the Broncos made the right decision in the best interest of their football club, and it worked out for them. And I think that what Milwaukee did with Damian Lillard has a great chance of working out for them. But it does present an opportunity for another team to get him for nothing. And bringing Damian Lillard to the Denver Nuggets is not even exactly the same as the Pittsburgh Steelers bringing in Russell Wilson. Because the Nuggets, for better or worse, have Jamal Murray at that spot. They're not making him the focal point, but they're bringing a guy in and saying, hey, we have a great chance of winning a title, and maybe you could fill in as a bench player and help us do that. I'd consider it. How could you not? How could you, if you're any team? Here's the issue, though. If a team signs Damian Lillard at his age, coming off of Achilles, and asking him, because, of course, this is the team that's in it because they're in on everybody, the Miami Heat. I find that fit to be a bit problematic, don't you? That's like the Steelers signing Russell Wilson. Like, you're bringing this guy in to take you to the next level. You're not bringing this guy in as found money, because the Steelers made Russell Wilson their starting quarterback, despite my pleadings. Miami will be bringing in Damian Lillard and expecting him to essentially replace Jimmy Butler? With that roster, and by the way, they just lost Duncan Robinson to the Pistons, and now it all comes together. Why was Tim Hardaway available and willing to take the vet minimum? Well, because Detroit was making a bigger move, and by the way, getting a better player in Duncan Robinson to try and bolster their chances in the Eastern Conference next year. But you lose Duncan Robinson, like, it's just Hero and Bam. And I like Jaime Jaquez as much as the next guy, but, like, he's a role player. So they be bringing in Damian Lillard to put them in the mix with the best teams in the Eastern Conference at a time where the full effectiveness, whatever Damian Lillard is going to be, is not this year. It's next year and beyond, when Boston reconfigures their team. Along with the other Eastern, who knows how good Detroit and Orlando are going to be 2 years from now. So I think Damian Lillard, I think the best spot for him to go would be to a place like Denver. Now, does he want to win a championship that way? I don't know. It seemed like Russell Westbrook was okay with it. I mean, that was the plan with Russell Westbrook, wasn't it? Now, the difference with Damian Lillard, obviously, is that he's going to show up at the last minute, and then we don't even know what he's going to be, how much he's going to be able to contribute. At least Russell Westbrook was with the Denver Nuggets for the duration of the season. My guess is that Damian Lillard will use this opportunity to just rehab the entire year. That Damian Lillard will not sign with the team or play basketball this upcoming season. But everything I just said will apply this time next year. Right? He will still be available for very little. And he'll have an entire year removed from the Achilles. I don't know that Damian Lillard will be the player he used to be, but you could do a lot worse than a guy like Damian Lillard coming off of the Achilles. So my guess is he's not going to be quick to just sign this week with Denver or Miami and be like, I'm good. Because from his perspective, it might be better for whatever future he has left in the NBA to just sit out the entirety of the year and not push it and not rush back. And then survey the landscape. See what else is out there. I don't know that it behooves Damian Lillard to make a decision now. But the Nuggets should be interested and remain interested. That should be a situation that they monitor. As should any title contending team. Houston, Minnesota, OKC, New York. I mean, go down the list. Opportunity like this one that has just been presented by the Milwaukee Bucks decisions doesn't come around a lot. I think there's going to be a frenzy for Damian Lillard when he decides he's ready to pick his next employer. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on that and also what's been going on with the Avs and the Nuggets. Porter, a first-round pick in many moons from now, and Dario Saric has now turned into Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown. Oh, we got to factor in Russell Westbrook. Let me try again. You lose Porter, a first-round pick in the 2030s, Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric, and you get Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, Jonas Valanciunas, and Tim Hardaway. Meanwhile, the Avs locking up a key depth piece in Parker Kelly, but these Nikolai Ehlers rumors out there. If they can get him to sign on the dotted line to a multi-year contract extension, goodbye to Marty Necas. And maybe that's how they acquire depth. But outside of the Parker Kelly signing, nothing really to report with the Avs here on the first day of NHL free agency. We'll be back after this. Congratulations to Chris, the winner of the Switchbacks tickets for Friday night, also known as the 4th of July, also known as Independence Day. You did not win. If your name is not Chris, switchbacksfc.com. Still some tickets available for that one, but they will sell out. I promise you that. The big question here, after the flurry of moves that the Nuggets have made, is ultimately where do they stand in the Western Conference pecking order? Are they the biggest threat to OKC in the West? And I think that they are. Yesterday, I would not have said that. But now that you have made really more of a significant upgrade just because of how bad the guy you had in that spot was, the upgrade from Saric to Valanciunas, and then you add 3-point shooting in Tim Hardaway. These were the moves today where the Nuggets got better. And then you start to add up all of these other things within the margins. Right? Can you count on Cam Johnson to be healthier in the postseason than Michael Porter? We know that this team is committed to the development of the younger guys. And now it's interesting with Tim Hardaway and Valanciunas, it's almost like the opportunities for the younger guys is dwindling. Like that's that's so like beyond what anybody cares about on a day like today, because these are, eye-popping moves and these are names that you know. But what happened to the development of the younger players? Where's Jalen Pickett going to get minutes? With Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway. Deron Holmes. I think this clearly signals that they are going to slow play Holmes's development. And I think you can understand that, certainly with the addition of Jonas Valanciunas, but also understanding that Deron Holmes, this is his rookie season, essentially. I think Julian Strawther, of all of these guys, maybe not Deron Holmes, but again, different circumstance. I think Julian Strawther is the one that they are going to pour into. I think they look at Julian Strawther as, hey, we need to develop this guy. We need to get this guy going, because here's the other part that nobody cares about today. But just for the record, both Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway, be ready, will not be Denver Nuggets a year from now. Right? You don't care. I knew you wouldn't. I'm just telling you, they won't be. So they'll still be left with this group of young players. But I think Julian Strawther is the prized pupil, if you will. I think Julian Strawther is going to get a lot of opportunities here. More than Pickett, more than Holmes, more than Peyton Watson. What I'm fascinated by, you get Valanciunas, and I get it. There are a couple of extra. They're going to want to go like 12 players deep, right? So some guys will get time. But if they believe in Deron Holmes the way that they do, they bring in Jonas Valanciunas. You know, a guy who, plus Julian Strawther and Brown and Hardaway, you know who the guy that seems to be getting a little squeezed here? Peyton Watson. I mean, you could say that if you need more of a defensive presence, you could go to Watson. And if you need more scoring, you could go to Strawther. But ultimately, it comes down to which guy do you believe in more? And the way the Nuggets roster is currently constructed, I think it's clear that Julian Strawther and Deron Holmes are the younger players that are going to get more of the opportunity. With Jalen Pickett, it makes sense. I don't know that Jalen Pickett was ever going to be, the answer to any Nuggets question. All of these guys are going to get time. They're going to try and develop them all. But I think it's Strawther and Holmes that are going to, I don't want to say be, that the Nuggets are playing favorites, but I think they're the ones that the Nuggets kind of feel like we could have really something in these guys. Peyton Watson's been at it for 4 years. He might be just this. So David Adelman, plan accordingly. Jalen Pickett was never, I don't think, supposed to be like a regular rotation guy. Bruce Brown can handle point guard duties. It's not like the Nuggets have a traditional point guard with the starters. But getting back to my original point, you have the improvement of the roster, specifically with the two moves today. You expect Cam Johnson to be healthier than Michael Porter. Is there some more development that can be made by Christian Braun? The development of the young guys. And I keep going back to this, and I'll say that the Denver Nuggets are the biggest threat to OKC in the West, and I mean it. But at the same time, the moment that Jamal Murray shows up for game one and he's playing himself into shape, I'm going to change my mind, and you will allow me to do it. All of this is contingent on the message finally getting through to Jamal Murray. He is such a talented player. His talent is not in question. His commitment level to being there day one, ready to go, to get this team back to where they need to be. If he finally gets that message and he works this offseason, there's no Olympics, right? So he could get rested. He could do whatever it is that Jamal Murray would like to do when he has some downtime. But when it's time to ramp up, be back, ready, in shape, and ready to put together an all-star caliber campaign. If he does that, then the Nuggets absolutely are the biggest threat to OKC. If I see what I've seen from Jamal Murray the last couple of years, I'm going to have to amend it. Because how is that version of Jamal Murray going to deal with Minnesota any better than he has? I'm not putting away the idea that Minnesota is a bad matchup for the Nuggets. I still think that they are. But I think with all of these other things in the margins that the Nuggets are counting on working in their favor, I think they have the potential to get back at Minnesota and get over that hump. But not if Jamal Murray is heat pack throwing Jamal Murray. So I want to be more definitive, and I guess I'm being definitive in saying I believe that the Nuggets will prove to be the biggest threat to OKC in the West. But independent of all of these moves that the Denver Nuggets have made, there's still the question about Jamal Murray, who remains one of their biggest questions. But he can answer that early. He can. We don't gotta wait till first round of the playoffs, game 82, even December. The questions that I have about Jamal Murray, the questions that I think internally the Nuggets have about Jamal Murray, they can be answered at training camp. They can be answered opening night. Jamal Murray is in shape, healthy, ready to rock and roll. Then the Nuggets will be the biggest threat to OKC. If OKC is completely healthy, I would still take OKC in a 7-game series. I think they have earned that much. But above Minnesota, above Houston, I think you could put the Denver Nuggets. From the 719, do you take back your comments about Kroenke now? I told you to give him the benefit of the doubt. Wait, were there 2 people that text me that? I did acknowledge somebody earlier who I remember texting me that. I take back nothing. I'm defiant till the very end. It's worked. It has. It's made this GM duo has made the Denver Nuggets a better basketball team. And again, what the Nuggets have accomplished more than anything else is completely changing the narrative surrounding them. Morale has been boosted inside and outside of Ball Arena. I do give Josh Kroenke credit for that. I do. I still don't know, and I'll never know, but could Ben Tenzer have done all of this by himself? Could John Wallace have? Do we have to have the co-GMs? Is it really necessary? Because you can't be so biased towards the result. The result says, yes, they need both of them. Do they really need both of them? So I still don't know that right now is the time to reinvent the way that front offices are put together, but the results have been pretty good so far. But it's also because Josh Kroenke does not believe that the Denver Nuggets need drastic changes. So status quo, so doing, promoting from within, all of this kind of stuff. It works for what he thinks the Denver Nuggets need. I thought that the Denver Nuggets needed a bit more change. But then Sean Marks comes along and says, we'll take Michael Porter. Done good. Josh Kroenke did good. But to take back comments, I don't know. I think I was in the majority in questioning what was going on here. And I've been on Kroenke's side. When a lot of people were sharpening their knives at Josh Kroenke because of firing Michael Malone, I backed him up on it. I said it was the right call. When it comes to the front office, yeah, I was doubting him a little bit. But new information has come in the form of Cam Johnson and $10 million of cap space and Bruce Brown and Jonas Valanciunas. And yeah, they got figured out. But if they lose to OKC, then what? Did they really accomplish what they set out to accomplish if they lose to OKC in a 7-game series? But this front office deserves a lot of credit for what they did the last 24 hours. They do. No doubt about that. That'll be it for the show. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Now it's the Avs' turn. what will happen with this Nikolai Ehlers stuff and the impact on Marty Necas's future in Colorado. So we'll see, and then we'll see what else happens in NBA free agency. Not quite done with that yet. Enjoy your evening. We'll talk tomorrow.